My name is Michael Baccellieri. I'm with Leupold Stevens. Today what we're going to be talking about is diopter setup. Diopter setup is going to be a little bit different from a long-range precision rifle to an LVPO or a low variable powered optic. Right now these optics are becoming very popular and starting to grow a lot of backing, and you're going to see them starting to get integrated more into law enforcement agencies as well as the military due to the capability increase that it gives you for positive identification, a liability mitigation, being able to problem solve at distance that you normally wouldn't have the capability of doing with a simple one power optic like a red dot or a holographic one power optic. So looking at what this gives us is this gives us the ability, especially with an offset red dot, to be able to have this thing on a higher power, 4 power, possibly 6, maybe even 8 power, and be able to roll over and still use that optic while this one is on a higher power, being able to have a 1 power magnified optic available to us when we need it immediately. But diopter setup is very different, and something that a lot of people struggle with, something that we hear in a lot of our classes, is it feels like a LVPO is not a true 1 power optic when it's on 1 power. And the reason for that is due to the diopter. Now, what the diopter does is we can take the diopter, whether it's the entire ocular housing or just the ocular lens, and we're gonna move this, and as you move it, you're actually unscrewing it and screwing it back in, physically moving the location of this back or towards the muzzle end of the rifle, the muzzle end of the scope. And in doing that, what we're doing is we're changing the effective focal length for the end user in their eye prescription. Now, we all have seen that individual or might have an older set of eyes, and we are that individual when handed something to read, we grab it and physically move it further away. And what we're doing there is the same thing as we would do adjusting a diopter. We're changing our effective focal length. We're getting this at a distance to where our eyes can be relaxed, and that object or those letters or those words are in focus for us while we're relaxed. By changing the physical location of this ocular lens forward and back, we're simply doing the exact same thing that we would do with something, a piece of reading material, but we're doing it with the ocular lens. So we're moving that closer or further from us, bringing the reticle, whether it's a second focal plane where your reticle would be housed about here, or a first focal plane where your reticle would be housed about here, we're bringing that into focus for our individual eye prescription. Now that's something that we really need to focus on and do well for a precision optic, because a lot of times we're parked behind that precision optic for a long period of time. Whether you're a sniper, a hunter, a precision rifle shooter, for competition or whatever it might be, we can live behind that thing for a long time. And many of us have experienced the point where we get major headaches and can be rendered ineffective behind that optic because we don't realize that that diopter hasn't been set up to our individual eye prescription. So what we're doing is we're physically flexing our eyeball, forcing that reticle into focus, and that causes a strain for us, bringing in a headache that can really make it challenging. Well, we have to set up a diopter a little bit differently for an LVPO. And the thing about an LVPO is we're not living behind it. We're not setting up a hide sight and using it for long-term observation, long-term sustainability behind the optic. So what we really need, because this thing will probably live on 1 power for most of its life until we need it, we rapidly increase the magnification, use it for what we need to use it for, and then bring it back down to 1. We're going to be living on 1 power. Like I said, what we see a lot of times in our classes is people saying, I'm struggling with distortion, I'm struggling with what feels like I'm looking through a fishbowl or fisheye effect on that LVPO, is changing the diopter setting. Instead of crisping up the reticle for our eye prescription, we need to make sure that this is a true 1 power. So the problem with moving this forward and back is it will change your magnification. There will be a slight increase or a slight decrease in your magnification, which will change what you see through the optic with the world around you not being a true 1 power. So we need to actually set this up so that it is a true 1 power. The way I prefer to do this is get about 15 yards. And on the 15-yard line, I like to get numbers or something like that spray painted on my target, or targets with numbers or letters on them. Numbers and letters work best for my eye. Some people can do shapes really well. It's easier for them. I prefer letters or numbers. You figure out what works for you. But get this at 15 yards, and while looking into that diopter, we're going to move our head in and out of that scope and continue to adjust that diopter and fine tune it till the world is a true 1 power in the scope and it matches the world outside of the scope. From there, I like to move to the 10-yard line. I like to fine tune it a little bit better and then move to the 5-yard line. And once I'm at the 5-yard line, do all my fine tuning and my final adjustments on that diopter. The closer you get, if there's any disparity in true magnification of the world and magnification that we see inside of that optic, if there's any difference, it's going to rear its ugly head worse and worse the closer we get to that to that object. So due to the fact that we use this on 1 power for a CQB environment or a fighting environment inside of a room, the closer we are, we need it to be clear for us as we manage problems and problem solve through the scope. So start at 15, make sure you're toggling in and out of that scope, make sure that your diopter is set for a true 1 power, get a little bit closer, maybe around 10 yards, fine tune it again, get closer to 5 yards, and do your finalization of fine tuning that to make sure it's a true 1 power. And then after that, what we always tell people to do is torque stripe it with a paint pen. Get a paint pen on there and make sure that if it actually gets bumped off its mark, you have the capability of rotating it back to exactly where you need it for a diopter rapidly and not having to worry about it. We do what we call a pre-fire and a post-fire check. We pull this out of a rack, inside of a patrol car, out of a trunk, out of our rifle bag. We do a quick check, make sure our zeros are where they need to be. If they're capped, you don't have to worry about that. Make sure your diopter is set to where it needs to be on a long-range optic. We make sure that our side focus is set to wherever we're going to be shooting from in our baseline. When we have that torque stripe, we can do a quick check. We're good to go. When we're done for the day, before we put it away, we do another quick check, make sure that all our lines are aligned there. Any kind of issue that we've had with that moving out of place, we just realign it really quick, throw it back in our bag. We know that second we pull it out of our bag, if we don't have time to do a pre-fire check, we're as optimized as we possibly can be. Oftentimes what we do is we buy really high-end gear and make sure that we've optimized the capability of whatever system or platform we're using. The problem is we don't take the time to adjust our gear and make sure that within that gear and its capability, it's optimized for the individual shooter. Make sure that you're looking at this diopter, make sure that whatever scope or platform that you're using on that gun, you can optimize its capability for you as a shooter and you're not fighting your own equipment. I'm Michael Baccellieri, appreciate you listening.